When it comes to language, there are scholars who wonder, where does language actually come from? And if it has to come from somewhere, what was the first language? There are many theories regarding the origin of language. Some say we try to copy the sounds of animals. Some say we produce it because of social interaction. But the theory I'm going to talk about today is the divine source theory. Now, I'm saying theory here, meaning to say that it hasn't been proven. So the divine source theory, as the name implies, says that language comes from a divine source, from God, from a holy book. And the reason this is so is because a lot of holy books mention this. For instance, in the Quran, it can be found in Surah Baqarah that Allah taught Adam, Nabi Adam alayhi salam, the name of all objects. So first of all, teaching has to be, of course, in a language. You have to have some way of communicating with Nabi Adam alayhi salam. And of course, names. When you have names, that's obviously language over there. It is also mentioned in the Bible as well. There are also some Muslims who believe that, the first language is supposedly Arabic, Arabic being the language of Shurga, Bahasa Shurga. However, among the Hadith scholars, it is classified as a Hadith Da'if. But then, of course, there are people over the years who have been curious about this. One of the earliest people to be curious about this, ironically, is not a researcher, but it's a pharaoh. In Malay or Arabic, you call that Fir'aun. So one of the pharaohs, Pharaoh Psammetichus, or more known as Pharaoh Psamtik, he had this very wild idea. If a child, a baby, an infant, were to be taken away from people who were speaking, and then they were not exposed to anything, and then they should speak that so-called original language. So once upon a time, he had this crazy idea. Take these two kids who were just born and send them to a mute shepherd. So after 2 years, suddenly the babies spoke. And they spoke this word called Bekos. It comes from a language called Phrygian. Phrygian was once spoken in an area which is now known as modern Turkey. And of course, we're like, so the first language has to be Phrygian. However, there is some controversy about this. A lot of people have debated it because, first of all, Bekos sounds a lot like, just remove the os, bang. So a lot of people have actually debated. Perhaps the babies were actually just copying the sound of the goats. Bang. A few thousand years later, we have King James IV from Scotland, who also did a similar experiment. Just get a baby sent to someone who's mute, and supposedly Hebrew was the first language according to him. And then you also have from the Mughal Empire, the Emperor Akbar the Great, who also did that. Why kidnap babies? Poor babies. Now, in a more realistic situation, however, when a child is not exposed to language at all, the child will lose the ability to speak. For instance, Jeannie Wiley. Jeannie Wiley, unfortunately, was abused severely by her father since she was born. And she was only rescued at the age of 13. And she has already passed the learning period for language. And she has not developed the ability to, acquire language at all because she missed that time period. So these are just some of the theories regarding the origin of language. But it doesn't really matter where language comes from, because what really matters is, language is very diverse, language is very colorful, and there are so many amazing things to study.